Oh my God! Now I'm going to be looking for a chance to make a bet with somebody, dude. You're either gonna just send me through the roof or destroy me.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and I'm sure in this completely unsurprising video, I've somehow managed to convince Jim Butcher to come on this channel, and I'm presumably going to ask him questions that he'll have answers to. Jim, for the 6 people here who don't know who you are, do you want to tell them what you're about?
My name is Jim Butcher. I'm an author. I've written a number of series. The ones that I'm working on right now are called the Dresden Files and the Cinder Spires. I've also written a series called the Codex Alera, and I did a Spider-Man book for Marvel.
Which is the only thing of yours I haven't read. I keep pushing it back, so I let you down on that. But
well, it's not very long, so it goes fast. Yeah.
One of these days I'll be like, I want to read another book this year to hit my reading goal, and I'll bang out that Spider-Man.
Do it, yeah.
So everyone always like opens the interviews with like an opening question, but I knew the answer to all of them. So I don't ask like what authors are your inspiration, because they'll be like, yeah, Spencer novels, Robbie Parker. So this is what I come up with. I know in a recent interview you said you've been specifically teaching your son, James Butcher, who has his own published novels, like writing and storytelling. In the process of teaching, what do you think you've like learned for yourself for your own writing? Has there been any moments where like you've said something to the kid and then kind of been like, yeah, I could do it that way? Yeah,
that's all teaching is, man. Teaching is at some point, no matter what you do, whether it's sports or martial arts or a craft, no matter what the activity is, you get to a point where other people aren't going to be able to show you very much. And in order to be able to learn after you get to that point, the only way that you can learn is to start teaching others the basics, because other people's brains don't work the same way that yours does. So you'll be forced to explain things that you understand very well in a number of different ways, because they won't get it the first time. You know, you can say, okay, here's how a scene should end, and they won't get it the first time. You have to be like, how can you not get that? It's the most basic thing about how. And then but you can't do that though, because you're teaching. So you got to be like, okay, stop. How do I go back? How do I explain this in a different way? Okay. And then you have to come up with something else. And the process of doing that makes you learn more about the craft for yourself, which is why you should always be a teacher at anything you want to be good at.
So for all the good scenes that we have for the remaining books, we should thank James Butcher for getting you to teach him and causing you to improve.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't have any ability of my own, so.
There does seem to be some evidence to the contrary there, but now James can claim although you can claim partial credit for any good scenes he writes. So there's kind of some give and take, but.
Oh, well, I'm his father. I get to claim credit for anything he does.
Oh, that's true.
That's
true. So actually you get to claim credit for him getting you to teach you to make you better at writing.
Yeah. God, I'm good.
So there's actually like an infinite feedback loop where you just get infinite credit for everything.
I think that works for me. I'm comfortable with that. Yeah.
All right. I'm really glad this worked out.
I keep being told we live in a patriarchal society, so I'm going to claim that as the patriarch in this case.
Good work. I'm really happy that you've accomplished everything based on this. I'm glad this worked out for you.
I know. I've gotten published again. It's amazing.
So also I have one thing you do a lot in Dresden Files, and you've talked about this, is you have people who are like idiots around, and that way they ask Harry a bunch of questions about the stuff that we don't know anything about, and then he can answer it, and we don't feel like we're being exposited to.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, in Alera and Cinder Spires, you've kind of made yourself much more difficult for yourself, because like in Alera, a lot of the stuff about the magic is just like fundamental to the world. Like,
yeah, and there's nobody from outside.
Yeah, so it's like asking about it would be like if a sudden contemporary be like, what are these boats? Are they the ones that go like in the water? Yeah.
What is this box that keeps things cold in your kitchen? Can you tell me more about that? No, it's the refrigerator, man. I don't know how it works. There it is. So, that's one of the concept is something that my teacher called the joy of idiocy, where you keep somebody around who doesn't know what's going on so they can ask the questions that you need them to ask. And it just makes your life so much easier if you've got an idiot about somewhere.
Like, how did you wrangle around like in Alera trying to like avoid info dumps while also make sure that we like don't just
Oh,
have no idea what's going on?
well, see, I made the society a little bit too integrated so that people understood things. If I was doing it again, I would have everybody for their own craft. They would have craft secrets, that you just didn't talk to other people about, and you just didn't unless they were like close friends or something. And then that way, as he made friends, he could ask questions and find out more things and go, aha. And if I was writing it differently, that's how I do it now. Or if I was writing it now, that's how I do it differently, rather. But which is why things aren't quite as integrated in the Cinder Spires novels. So you can have people that have no idea what etheric stuff is all about. So they have to go ask questions of an etherealist, or they have to consult an etheric engineer. Is this possible? And then you make the explanation also part of the story and part of the character stuff. I think that's what Lois Bujold does better than anybody else. Is she integrates world and story and plot and character all into a single whole. It's very difficult to divide it out into different things, which is that's mastery of the craft when you can think of all of that at the same time. And I don't think she understands quite how much of a genius she is at storytelling. She really is. But I keep striving to be more like Lois Bujold, in my own life, as a writer anyway. I don't know much about her other than her writing ability, which is outstanding, and that's what I care about.
You're like, the words are really good. That's
yeah. She can do the word. She can do the English thing so well.
Yeah. Very from what I've read, I would agree. I remember for Cursive Challenge, like there's so many scenes where it just like the first time you read it, it's like, oh, this is a fun scene, and then later it's like a directly plot relevant detail, like
right, exactly.
Absurdly tight novel in terms of like what could be cut.
Yeah, she's I suppose it could be that she's just the laziest writer on planet Earth, and she just doesn't want to write any more words than she absolutely has to. I mean, I'm sure that's not the truth, but I suppose that could explain it. Because her writing is just so lean and well done. Oh, I want to have her babies, professionally speaking.
Yeah, I've heard that before. So
yeah, she knows what she's doing.
She does. So that's something then. Also for Cinder Spires, is it maybe good you wrote Alera first and figure that out before you do your grand epic? Because presumably that will have the same problem.
That's never anything that you actually stop and think about. It's just sort of something that you notice in an interview when somebody asks you a question about it, and then you go, oh, wait a minute. Well, if I suppose I was stupid and I never even thought about it because I was too busy putting the world together. And there were so many things, there were so many moving parts to assemble. I never stopped to think, well, this could be done a lot better. So it would be much more enjoyable for the reader.
You proved upon it in Cinder Spires anyways, so you didn't need to consciously be thinking about it. So there you go.
Maybe that's it.
Subconscious Jim has got your back. And
yeah, well, I mean, that's what becoming good at something is all about. It's about integrating it into your subconscious. A master craftsman at his workbench doesn't stop and think to himself, oh, I'm going to need a T-square and my pencil and this ruler and this piece of wood. He's already busy thinking about what he's going to do 3 hours from now, while his hands are just taking everything down because he doesn't have to think about that anymore. Because he's just done it so often, he knows how to get to that point. And as a writer, I mean, eventually you get to that point as well, where it's like, no, I don't really plan the scenes out anymore. I mean, the way I put them together in my head already takes all that basic stuff that I learned in class, 30 years ago into account. But yeah, I'm still very much writing, with the same goals and the same tools and so on that I learned when I was a kid.
Well, it's good that you're learning the lessons even without having to consciously think about it. Even though I actually I think it probably sounds like it was a headache to manage, like delivering information without exposition. But I really like the way it's done in Alera, where you can't point out like this is where they explain what watercrafting does, but I know what watercrafters can do.
Yeah, it gets harder. At that time, it was just like, okay, the best that I can do for Alera is just to show it in action and to be really explicit about showing it in action. So for all the big crafting stuff, I mean, firecrafting's easy to understand.
Yeah.
Boom.
Boom. Yeah.
Here's a flaming sword. Here's an explosion. That's easy. Watercrafting, though, that would have been really difficult to try and explain from the outside. So I had to put it on a character who was going to be a viewpoint character so that we could get it the whole time. And then, when Tavi himself starts learning fury crafting, he's on a different plane than everyone else. So I have to sort of start showing things, from his point of view that aren't going to be like everybody else's point of view. He's not going to understand it the same way as somebody who can do anything he wants. He's not going to understand it the same way a specialist will, because the specialist will be better at their stuff, but won't have the understanding and the functionality with how it interacts, how their crafting interacts with all these other elements, whereas, he's already, Tavi's already worried about, okay, well, if I'm doing fire crafting and metal crafting at the same time, how does that interact with each other? And those are his worries. Whereas, if you're just a fire crafter, all you have to worry about is kaboom.
Sounds like firecrafting is the more fun one. That's the Harry Dresden way,
Yeah. This is the Dresden way. I didn't ask how big the room was. I said I can't. That's the Dresden way.
Cast fireball 21 feet in front of you and then get yelled at by Harry.
Yeah, exactly.
That made me laugh so much when I first read day one.
Thank you. Does the fireball carry a tape measure? How does it know?
Yeah, I bring that up when I play D&D and for the first time playing D&D, someone and comes fast fireball. I'm like, there's this random book series where there's an actual wizard who plays D&D and complains about this, and it's hilarious.
I loved writing Dresden as the nerd, as the guy to play D&D with who would just ruin everything because he knew what was really up. And there were a couple of guys we played Star Trek with who were like that, who were physicists. And, at some point it just had to be like, guys, listen, I know you like showing off your stuff and all, but we really want to blow up that enemy ship by overloading a phaser and teleporting it into their engine room. So could you please just lighten up on the quantum mechanics for now?
Yeah. Harry tried. He even played a barbarian himself because he knew he'd get in the way. But then the other people played the wizard, and he's just He's just picture his eye twitching, and it's like.
Well, but every expert is like that, I think it's really shocking how ignorant the human race is as a whole, even now. Where we can do all this stuff, but there's so much of it is just ritual. I have a ritual that starts my PC. That I do, and I have to go through these steps. And if I can do that, it was like if I really wanted to get into it, because I used to be a big computer tech guy, I can sit down and go, okay, yeah, I know how all this works. I can follow all this through. I could tell you exactly what the computer is doing at each point of this. But so much of this stuff in life, my car, I couldn't tell you a thing about the car, what it does. I definitely drive that one by ritual. But yeah, I think we all do so much ritual magic for all our tech, and it's difficult, I think, occasionally for humans to really understand how ignorant we are about everything that's sort of outside of our area of expertise. I can tell you all kinds of things about stories, but somebody comes up and asks me about politics, I'm just like, I don't know. I can't tell you who's right. Have fun. I hope we do our best.
I hope we don't blow up. Yeah.
I hope we do our best, and there's not a war. That would be great. Not a war would be cool.
I saw it phrased once as like every human, if they traveled back in time, is like 2 follow-up questions away from looking like a total idiot. Like, oh, we got cars in the future, and they roll on wheels, and they have engines, and it's like, oh, how do the engines work? Well, it's like some are electric, some are gas. It's like, oh, what's electric? Lightning?
It's magic made from lightning.
Yes, Zeus gave us the gift of these cars and computers.
Yeah. But yeah, so and then when people sit down and start talking about storytelling who aren't storytellers, and I'll be sitting there with other writers when somebody who's not a writer will be going on about something about storytelling. They do something else that's like storytelling adjacent but not storytelling, and the desire to just leap up and go, no, that's not how it works, is so strong. And yet, you got to let other people have their thoughts too, because they're coming at it from a different angle. Like when we were talking about teaching earlier. So there's probably something you could learn there from them. But boy, it is so hard. somebody starts going on about Campbell, and I just want to shake my fists and be like, Campbell's so overrated. He doesn't know about stories. He knows about talking about stories, and he knows about analyzing them, and he's brilliant at that. But if you're a writer, Campbell will so screw you up. Stay away from him.
Well, as the person who doesn't know what they're talking about for storytelling, I somewhat appreciate the not being interrupted, and I try and keep that in mind. That I like when I'm like, yeah, this book, I think it was good for this reason. I try and keep in mind, like, I might be completely wrong here. Like, gotta be careful.
Yeah, but if you liked it, if that book reached out and talked to you, you are the expert at that because you know how it interacted with you. In fact, you're the only expert.
It's true.
So don't ever be ashamed of liking a book. If somebody tells you you shouldn't have liked it, tell them to go fuck off.
Oh, I do.
Excellent.
I have a thing. So in this case, overrated in other contexts, when people like, if I like a book and they're like, that book is overrated, I'm like, wait, was I wrong to like it that much? So I complain to people when they call books overrated. And
it depends on why they liked it and how it spoke to you. And, have you been through something similar to that character in your life? Because there's some characters that are written, they write some specific part of that character's life. And if you've lived it, you go, oh, because it's like an arrow to the heart. And then everything that character does after that point, you go, oh, I'm with you, pal. I've been there. I've had my car break down under those exact circumstances. Or,
when the building's on
broken
fire.
Up with that same way. And it was so humiliating, like that.
Don't you just hate it when the building's on fire and it's not your fault, but everyone's going to assume it's your fault?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so relatable. And that's actually one thing, because sometimes I think it's obvious why I find an emotional connection to something because they're kind of similar to me. I'm always really impressed when writers write like a situation that I've never been in at all, and I'm still able to be like really emotionally connected to it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do is we hotwire people's emotions.
Yeah.
We're a bunch of mad scientists. We really are.
You're really good at tricking us into vividly hallucinating while looking at weird squiggly lines and believing that things are real for a little bit.
Man, my teacher used to tell me that. She used to stand up in front of a class and say, the actual job of a writer, you can go on and on about product and sales and so on, but the actual job of a writer is to manipulate the reader's emotions. Is to psychologically manipulating them into having fun or into hating somebody or into any of a number of other emotions. And as long as you can manipulate them, they will be happy to give you lots of money. And that used to make me so mad because, I looked at writing as this pure, passionate, artistic thing. And then I started learning how to do it well when I finally started listening to her. And the more as I've gone on through my career, the more I realized, oh, she's right. If you're a successful writer, it's because you can make people laugh when you want them to laugh and cry when you want them to cry and hate who you want them to hate. And people love that. I loved seeing that villain get what was coming for him. And it's like, okay, great. I really set you up for that. You were supposed to love it. Dance puppet. You got to kind of resist that, because it's easy to get to that point where it's like, oh, I know how the readers are going to react to this. And you have to walk that balance point of enjoying being a mad scientist while still going, but you still have to remember they're people. Yeah. And you can't quite push them too far. So, I think that's when a lot of stories kind of go off the rails is when writers forget about that. It's like, okay, they're still feeling, you're simulating this pain, but they're still experiencing it.
Yeah.
Pain is nonetheless pain.
Last time I was rereading one of your books on audio because at work I can do audio for the background for some of the stuff, nice. And I paused one of the sections of that book because I knew what was coming up and it was too busy. So, I don't want to go. It was Battleground.
Right. Okay.
So yeah. So good job. Basically, you've successfully emotionally manipulated me into buying all of your books.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So good work.
That's what I do.
It is. That's your job description. Because I know sometimes, ironically, even though that's the job, you will see as a criticism a book that it felt like the author was just trying to manipulate my emotions, which is the point, but it's the point without making them feel like you were just trying to make them sad. Does that?
Yeah, you got to be slick about it.
Yeah.
it's like everything else. I mean, you can't just when the guy's trying to sell you a car, he doesn't walk up to you and say, "I'm going to sell you a car today." I mean, he comes up and talks to you about everything else, but you know what he wants. He knows what he wants. You both know that the other one knows what they want. So you don't go, talking about it or trying to, you don't go over the top with it, or you don't do very well.
It's like, yeah, I know you want me to cry reading this. You know you want me to cry reading this, but I want to feel like you just told me what happened and I happened to cry, not that you
Right,
went,
exactly.
I'm going to make this guy cry.
Not that I'm setting you up from the get-go.
Yeah. I mean, you are, but you're pretty good at tricking me into feeling like you're not while I'm reading it, even if, in the back of my mind, I know you are. So,
well, I'm doing a bunch of stuff. I'm juggling a lot of things, and only one of those is the make you cry ball.
Yeah.
So, but I've got to keep all these other balls moving though, or else you'll see that one.
Yeah. Good sleight of hand.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned subconscious Jim before, and I have kind of a question about subconscious Jim, because you have this magic trick you do a couple times in Dresden where the first time you meet a character, they just kind of seem like this straightforward foil, and you're like, Morgan. And you're just like, yeah, this dude gets on my nerves, or do it a couple times, but Morgan's the key example. And then later, when they become more complex, you get the feeling that they've been this complex person like the entire time, and we just didn't know. And I'm always curious, like, was this young Jim being like, I'm really smart, this dude's actually going on, or was this wiser Jim being like, I could work with that young Jim? And I'm always curious, like, where on that balance it falls.
Young Jim had really fantastic energy and a really great imagination, and he was really, really good at just grabbing lots of stuff and kind of throwing it all together on the canvas, and somehow it gelled together and worked. Older Jim now understands a little bit more about why that happened and about how lucky he got when he was younger in terms of how he proceeded artistically. And so I look at the younger me, and I look at younger me who was writing much simpler characters, much more. I don't want to say simpler, because that's much more archetypal characters. Because if you do it right, it's an archetype, and if you do it wrong, it's a stereotype. So, but I was writing I was writing pretty pure archetype characters when I was getting started. And then as I got older, I went, yeah, but you know what? There's so much more room for the character than this, within the story world, because, as you get older, you find out more and more about people and how complicated they are, and how, there are people who can be, sublime at something and yet an awful human being, at everything else. And how do you start to take that in? How do you process that? You realize that all these people that you thought were just pretty straightforward, whatever, over the years you go, oh, wait a minute, they're more complicated than that too, and I barely know what's going on. I think when you get to that point, at some point as you age, you get to a point of humility where you go, oh, wait a minute, I've got no clue what's happening here. I should pay more attention. Maybe I should do some more reading or a little homework. And that sort of translated over into my writing, where it's like, okay, these characters, I've done them awfully simply. You know what? I think there's more to this person than that. Let's find out. And then you kind of start writing that person, and you see what else is there. I did that with Morgan. I've done that with a bunch of characters.
Yeah, it's actually. So I had this random series on my channel, and it was every author I've read, like, what are they the best at? Not relative to themselves, coming up with something that I think they're better at than everything else. And for you, I had like changing your perspective on characters without actually feeling like you changed who the characters are. I think you're genius at it.
Yeah, that lens shift is important. Where you click that different predator lens down, and you get that different kind of vision.
Because yeah, it's not like you took. So Morgan, I think, is like the clearest example. It's not like you took Stormfront Morgan and you're just like, let's discard him and let's just write this new character who I'm going to make more complex. Like,
right.
The Morgan we meet later fits with Stormfront Morgan so well. Like, you can read Stormfront and have it still fit. I don't know. Yeah, I guess you just described kind of how you did it, but I just want to say, like, good job, because it blows my mind, like, on every reread.
Yeah, you have to stay consistent, because that's especially on a long running series, because that's the pact you make with the reader. Like nobody says it out loud, but you do things like, okay, this character isn't all of a sudden going to switch from somebody who hates Dresden to someone who adores him. That's not going to happen. You can make that happen, but you have to do it in stages. So and I think that's one of the things that happens a lot on television lately is the way the writing structure works on TV is that you can work on like a series that's like a long running series, say a 15-year series, and eventually you're going to be making too much money for them to afford you on that series, so you're going to get hired off to a different series, because you're going to take your experience and go, and then they're going to have to hire people to take your place, and a lot of times they have to hire new writers to do that. And a lot of times new writers have got so much going on that they can't keep track of, everything that's happened with every character. So occasionally you'll see a character suddenly change and you kind of go, what the hell? If you're just watching the show and you're just watching the story, you're just sort of involved in that. And you go, what the hell? Why did that character change? And then you get on IMDb and you go, oh, new writing staff. Yeah, okay. They've got new people in here. They're working on a tight deadline. They've got so many things to juggle, and they couldn't keep everything up in the air, because they weren't as up to date on it as the last crew.
Because I mean, it's already hard when you're writing it all yourself. Imagine how hard it is when you take over from someone else.
Yeah, especially if you roll in and it's the job that you're getting so that you can put food on your table. It's like, no, I wasn't really a fan of the show before, but I've watched 8 seasons of the 15 now, and I'm getting caught up, and it's like, okay, yeah, cool, and eventually they will be back up to speed and everything, but you kind of notice those little inconsistencies, and readers / watchers / audience members are really, really smart about that. I mean, you can't I've heard people say, yeah, the audience doesn't care, and that just blows my mind, because it's like, no, the audience cares.
Yeah.
That's why they're there, and so you really have to. I think that's one of the things that a lot of writers don't do is they don't give sufficient credit to the audience in terms of how intelligent they are and how they're going to notice things and how they're going to look at things. Because I work with beta readers, and some of them have just incredibly good recall of consistency and so on. You get a lot of folks who are like lawyers and engineers who they know that tab A and tab B to go together, and they've got everything diagrammed in their head. So when you get something wrong, they'll be like, "Wait a minute, you've thrown off my entire diagram." And at first, when I was getting feedback like that, it was very frustrating. And then at some point, I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is the most valuable feedback I can get, because this is one of the big challenges as a writer, and this is not something that I mention a lot. So this is going to be new. I don't think I've talked about this in another interview that I can recall. But one of the big challenges as a writer is your entire job is reducing drag on the reader. You want to reduce the number of things that bump the reader out of being totally into what you've got going. You want them completely focused on that. You want them watching a movie that is playing inside their head. And anything that you do that nudges them out of that movie, like if there's an awkward sentence or there's a grammatical error, or there's something inconsistent with it, you get a detail inconsistent with a character, or anything like that bumps them out of that movie, reduces how much they enjoy the overall story. So like 95% of your job as a writer, all the different things that you learn, all the techniques and tricks and everything that you learn, are tricks just to keep from bumping the reader's elbow while they're reading. And that's 90% of the job right there is keeping things smooth and even for the reader, so that they can enjoy the ride instead of wondering if the ride's about to fall apart on them. Which, granted, that can be an exciting ride at the amusement park if you're wondering if it's going to fall apart on you, but perhaps that's not what you want to do as a regular sort of thing, regular sort of experience.
And I guess also, like, a lot of the time when you get bumped, it reminds the person that this isn't a real ride. I'm actually just wearing VR glasses.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes them go, oh, wait, do I have time for this? Do I need to be getting up? And see, my goal as a writer is I want you to not get enough sleep for work the next day. That's my goal as a writer. It's like, I want you to start reading at 7 and to finish at 4 in the morning going, oh God, I've got to be to work in 4 hours, and then for you to close the book and go, worth it. And that's my goal as a writer.
That's a good goal, I think. And I think it's also a lot of time you'll see criticism of media and it sounds somewhat pedantic because it's just like you're nitpicking, but those nitpicks take away the illusion that it's real and like
Right.
they add up. So even if so this is a random thing, I'm not going to say who it was. There was a random scene in a book where like a normal non-magical child dragged a full-grown adult man up a flight of stairs. And I was immersed in the book and I read that and I was like, oh, this is fake. Like my brain was like, this is made up. Like that child did not drag a 200-pound man up that flight. And it sounds like such a pedantic thing, but I was like, this story is happening and then it isn't. And it's, yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of the things that makes writing really hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. And you have to figure out which things am I going to leave in, which things am I going to gloss over, which things am I going to put a spotlight on, or to sort of hurry the gaze past it so that you'll see this going on in the background, but 99% of people won't notice. So that's a little bit inconsistent, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, when you notice when Daenerys has her Starbucks sitting at hand, at the council, at the small council meeting, you kind of go, wait a minute, hang on, I can't get into anything else that's happening here because of that Starbucks cup. Now it's gone. Oh my God.
Like it sounds so nitpicky, but it's true because it's like,
true. Yeah, exactly.
Because when they're standing next to the Starbucks, my subconscious part of my brain is like, oh, Daenerys is a fake person.
Yeah.
John's a fake person.
I mean, for writers, for artists of all kinds, that are telling a story, we're all playing pretend together. And as the writer, I have to be playing pretend way harder than anybody else who's there because I have to do it for everyone, and I've only got my one brain, and you've got hundreds of thousands of brains out there reading my stuff. So it has to be as unfair as possible. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things you have to do as a writer is you have to love it. You have to pretend. It's why I always advise people I'm mentoring, it's like, yeah, you should try writing some new things that you haven't written before because you might find yourself doing something that you fall in love with. But you should also write the things that you love because it's a big deal how much energy you can pour into it. Writing, I mean, you do have to have a work ethic to do it professionally, but it also has to be play because you play a lot harder than you work. And that's just a human fact. I mean, you the stuff that you love, that you have fun with, you'll put so much more energy into it, which is why, which is why you've never seen me write a regular murder mystery that would make me 10 times as much money. It's like, yeah, but there wouldn't be any demons or fireballs. And
yeah, that's the
that even, how could you even have fun writing that?
And that's why I remember the plot of Changes better than any of my textbooks I read in school.
Yeah.
So then that's also, I know one other thing, you have a lot of like time skips between your books. Some people like style wise, they plan out series where like the next book just happens right after.
Right.
This is another thing that I think you're like eerily good at, making it feel like that amount of time has happened, but also that like the stuff we missed wasn't more cool than the stuff we got.
Right.
Like how much of a pain is that for all these different characters to like keep track of? How do you go about like making it feel like, oh, we haven't seen this character in 4 years in book? Right. What are the 4 years worth of stuff that happened to them?
Yeah, well, and what you have to do is you have to, because this is part of your unspoken agreement with the audience, that you don't do anything huge off screen. You don't have this falls into my rules of sequel movies that I really ought to write up at some point for Hollywood. If you had two characters who were busy getting together romantically in the first movie, you don't have them have gotten together and gone through the entire relationship and exploded, and now they're snarky exes in movie 2. And then you show them getting together again, and it's like, come on, you can do so much more than that. I mean, that is that you're taking that is the cheapest, easiest way out. You got to do better. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things you have to do is that you can't develop a character hugely, completely off screen. You have to share the audience with it. They have to feel like, because these are, the characters that are in your favorite long running series become like friends. And if they don't tell you big things that happen, that feels like a little betrayal, and it's harder to be friends with that person in the future. And as a writer, I need you to be friends with all my figments. So it's important to me that, all the big stuff I show happening on the screen, happening with my imaginary friends.
I guess we could be enemies with some of them, but we have to have a strong relationship with all of them.
Yeah, now enemies, you can have major things happen off screen, and that's okay because they're supposed to be treacherous and untrustworthy. But for friendly characters, you kind of got to show them growing. And if they're not growing, then if you've got to a point where it's like, well, I kind of wanted that to happen, but there's no way to show that happening on within the story. Okay, you know what? This character's just been really, really happy for the past 3 years. They've been married, their job's been going well, their relationship is fine, their kids are growing up happy and healthy. That character's doing well, and that always makes people feel warm, and it makes them feel good. They go, oh, that character's having a good life, and then they remember who you are, and then they go, oh, wait a minute, that character's been having a good life. And because with a good writer, that's not going to happen. It's not going to go on for very long.
I was going to say the classic Jim Butcher move of just have things go well for years straight, right? Like that's what you're known for.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that you can always do with character. That's one of those useful things you can do with off-screen characters. How's life been? It's been wonderful. And now you're back on screen with Harry Dresden. So guess how long that's going to last? And that you both get the reassurance for the reader that good things can happen. Because good things have been happening to that character, even if technically they've been off screen, it would have been kind of boring to read about anyway. But also, and then you get the double-edged sword of, wait a minute, things have been really good for them. That means something bad happened. And then they start building up that anticipation then. So every time you just sort of, vaguely threaten that character a little, the reader's like, here it comes. Because readers are smart, man. They get what's going on, and I love playing those games with the readers.
I know things aren't going to all go well.
I mean, I look at writing as something that we're doing together because I need the audience. I'm running a D&D game with myself, playing all the characters and all the NPCs, and then writing it down, and that's what I do for a living. But while I'm doing that in my head, I'm imagining specific people reading certain parts of the story and going, "Ooh, this is going to tear this person to shreds. I know it. This person's going to howl laughing when they read this." And that is part of what keeps the writing, fun and vital for me. Because I'm writing it for specific people often.
That makes sense. I think. So just write it for me specifically now.
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, Jake's gonna like this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have a pretty darn good track record, so you probably don't have to worry about that much. But stay on your toes. No, I should keep you worried.
Right.
I'm watching. So then I have one last, this is for the questions that I wasn't intending to go into spoilers. This one's a bit more straightforward. You have a history of winning writing related bets. I've joked that the Jim Butcher writing to win a bet is like the mythical version of Jim Butcher. So are there any ongoing bets that we should be aware of that you might be trying to win in future books?
No. Younger Jim was way more confident than current Jim is. Younger Jim was absolutely certain about all kinds of things. And current Jim, has learned more about the world and is a little bit more cautious. But I suppose I could still make a bet, but it would have to be I'd have to make a bet with Sanderson or Correa, Martin or somebody. No, I don't even know Martin well enough to, but Correa, I definitely make a bet with him on something. I don't know what, but we could definitely make a bet about something, and then I could maybe I need to do that to level up now, maybe in order to.
It's worked well in the past.
Oh my God! Now I'm going to be looking for a chance to make a bet with somebody, dude. You're either gonna just send me through the roof or destroy me here, because as soon as I lose one, then I'm just that dumb guy who couldn't acknowledge that he was going to lose that bet.
So I'm either a really good influence or a really bad influence, and frankly, I'm happy with that. That's kind of where I want to be.
What you don't want to be is that mediocre in the middle.
Yeah.
Nobody knows influence. Yeah. So if things go really well, I'm going to blame you. And if things go really bad, I'll blame you. But if things go really bad, I won't really be famous. I don't think that'll reflect much on you.
So I kind of win either way.
Yeah,
that's
all Jake's fault. Yeah.
That means, if
Boy,
we
Jim
come in
Hooker.
and because you have a good habit. It seems like wiser Jim cashes the checks that younger Jim writes. So if we hope that Jim continues to get wiser, he'll continue to just cash the ambitious checks that.
Hey, future me, you can cover this, right? You can.
You got this, bud. Yeah,
You got this. I have faith in you, future me.
See, you're betting on yourself. It's optimism. It's good.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what it was all along. It wasn't just me being an arrogant young man.
Yeah, you're just betting on yourself. Exactly. It's
right.
It's very good. Good job. All right. So now I have my first Dresden related question. Very serious topic. Are you ready?
Yeah.
When you write the parkour jokes, do you laugh?
I did, because that was all an inside joke between me and my sons and their gaming buddies. Because when Battlefield, I'm not sure if it was 3, when Battlefield 3 first came out. Because before that, Battlefield 2, all you had was dolphin diving. Like you had a dive animation, and you had a flat animation, and you had a jump animation. And if you jumped and then dove flat, then you would just sort of be doing this dolphin thing through the air, and then you would land on the ground. And yet you could use that in specific circumstances to dodge fire and stuff like that. So it was sometimes worth doing. And then when we went to 3, we still had our dolphin diving reflexes, but you would try and dolphin dive over a car, and then your character would actually put his hands down on it and parkour over it. They had worked that into the animation of things, and everybody was so impressed with that. And so they would just start. When they did it, they would. I just did parkour. I don't know what. And so they would just start referring to it like that. They'd be running across. All right. Well, they've got a squad coming up this side staircase. I think we better parkour. Move over here. If you can get over those cars, parkour. Like that. And that was just sort of in the background, whereas you would just sort of say parkour whenever you were jumping. And it was just part of the sentences, and people would walk by our gaming stations, and just give us the weirdest looks, because we would just randomly throw the word parkour into a sentence. So, when I was having Dresden write that, I was just remembering the days of Battlefield 3.
That's a much better answer than I was expecting that question. I was expecting that to be a throwaway.
No. That was an inside joke between me and the boys.
Because that joke has the magic power of it should get dumber as you read it more. It actually just keeps getting funnier.
Yeah.
We might be experiencing exponential growth here. Like there might be some kind of flaw in the universe that it can't handle this. We now need, someone next time. If you're ever playing Battlefield, we need someone to dress up as a paladin and tell you that one does not say parkour, one simply does parkour.
Does parkour, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You're playing Battlefield, you can do both at the same time.
Fantastic. I now have a slightly more actual question. Okay. And this is something that I've been reading about Harry for a while now. This is a specific about the character Harry Dresden question. Because I think a very common way for writers to have a morally interesting character is make them lean into being utilitarian, where they're all I'll do this bad thing to accomplish this greater thing. And if it's done well, it really works. The thing I find interesting about Harry is he's almost so far in the other direction that it's scary again, where I'm not convinced he would kill one innocent person to save the world, even if everyone would be Harry, you got to do this. This is the best decision. Do you know, so I've described him when talking to people as deontologian instead of utilitarian to a degree that it's scary. Do you think you agree with my interpretation there? And if so, was it a deliberate thing, or is that just what you found interesting and it worked out that way?
Dresden's always been an idealist. From the beginning, he's been an idealist. And he, when he was getting started, his idealism was along the lines of Peter Parker's idealism. With great power comes great responsibility. I have to use my power wisely. And to him, that meant protecting all these people who didn't have power, from what he saw as not having power. And he still feels that way to some degree. But the people that he deals with on a regular basis, and people or near people that he deals with on a regular basis, that's not really an issue for them. So, he's had to take this idealism and bring it into this arena where it often just doesn't apply. You know, I mean, Marcone's a regular human guy. Is he without power? No, he's scared, etc. Um, and one of the things that he always, when he was starting off as a wizard, that he always wanted to do was he wanted to be sure that he didn't sell out, that he didn't become, you know, the wizard who, you know, would do something awful if he thought it would net something good for more people. You know, he didn't think that he had the the moral authority to make calls like that. So, you know, he's been wrestling with that. How does he keep his you know, fairly objective idealism, and how does he carry it into this world that is just full of gray everywhere? I mean, it's just gray muck everywhere he goes. And so how do you keep your shirt white in that? You know, that's hard. And he still tries. I mean, he does his best. He wants to be, you know, he sees himself as a good guy. He wants to be a good guy. He wants to be an example that his daughter can be proud of, you know, and yet, how do you do that when things get so confused? I mean, it's a difficult world to be a good person in. I mean, for everybody. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, especially for people with a lot of power, because having a lot of power, boy, that means you're going to have to be making some terrible choices. And that's one of the things that people will ask me about something that somebody's done a lot, and they'll say, "What do you think about that?" And my first reply is always, "Man, I'm really glad I never had to make that choice myself. I don't know what I would do. You know, it's hard to tell what's right." So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm grateful I've never had to make a choice that tough. You know, which is, you know, that's a good thing to be, because hopefully then life doesn't throw you more of those choices.
Yeah, we can all hope. And also, I'd say it feels like you're deliberately challenging him with the change of like who his allies and who he's regularly associating himself with as they become less human and more.
Yeah.
One could say Odin-y.
Yeah. Those more epic power level people have become very comfortable with gray equations. You know, they're good with that for the most part, or they wouldn't still be there. And, you know, Dresden, here he is stepping into this world, and that's not who he wants to be. And yet there's all these people that are telling him, no, you need to be that person now. This is where you are. It's time for you to be that person. And you know, how does he go up against that? How does he fight that?
Because, you know, as you're saying, they're only there because they're like that. Like if you gave Mab trolley problems, she'd be like, I don't understand the problem.
Yes. Oh yeah, she would totally be like, well, I mean, I think that if we hang a long blade out the side of the trolley, we can get that other guy over there as well as these 5 guys.
Yeah, I'd be like, wait, which of these 5 guys is the Summer Knight?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's like the classic trolley problem where it's like, first it's like, okay, you can agree switch it to one person instead of going 5. All right, what if you're pushing someone off the bridge to stop them? And usually people are like, no, I'm not okay with that now. Mab would just be like, yeah? Like,
yeah, Mab would just be like, well, the math all comes out the same.
Mab would not understand that intro to ethics class. She would be like, yeah, that's the same problem. I don't get it. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, you know, she would look at it and just be like, oh, children, you think these tiny little things matter? You know, yeah. people giving their consent and making choices, whatever.
Man, yeah. You really went off with Mab on these, like on how that, like Mab being, I think she's my favorite non-Harry Dresden character in this series.
Thank you.
And that would not have been on my bingo card 10 books in.
Yeah.
Like
Mab is somebody, I knew who she was from the very beginning. And you know, she was, I mean, the whole point of Mab was to make her the biggest, meanest dog on the block, more or less. And yet, if it's your dog, you know, it's different than if that's your neighbor who doesn't like you's dog, you know. And I've got to learn more about this because I adopted a pit bull, and I mean, he's a giant baby. You know, he's a giant baby who plays with like literal infants and so on, and it's just the most gentlest, sweetest creature you've ever seen. But he's built like a damn tank. I mean, he's got these huge muscles. He makes, you know, and just walking along, he just looks like he could flatten you. And other dogs are just they're always worried about him. Yet when I take him to the groomer, when I go to pick him up, he's always in the room with all the little dogs. because he gets along with the little dogs just fine, and the big dogs all think they need to challenge him. Little dogs just run back and forth underneath him, and they grab his tail and pull on it, growling, and he just stands there smiling, because he's a sweet boy. But yeah, I wanted to write that character who was so ferocious and so dangerous from the outside, and then be able to show people getting closer to her over time, and to see, and to be able to throw up those moments of where you look at her and she's got this very human look on her face, and she says, "I was mortal once."
Yeah.
And you realize, oh God, this is a person who things have happened to, and that's been, that's those moments of subversion, where you can take somebody like Morgan, who's been an unholy pain in the ass the whole time, and then to put him on your side, and suddenly when he's on your side, you go, oh, this is why Morgan has people who support him and who are behind him. Because he is absolutely a great guy to have next to you in a dark alley. You don't want him next to you at dinner or at a barbecue because, oh my God, what a drag. But, we're in a horrible post-nuclear war. Morgan, I pick Morgan for my team.
Yeah, he'd be a high draft pick in that situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Morgan, can we be friends, but only when someone's trying to murder me?
Exactly. Yeah, only when things are really, really bad. And Morgan'd be like, that's the only time I could stand you.
Yeah, that's what he's on. He just goes to all the other people's bad days, so it works for him.
Really, that's because Morgan, in a lot of ways, and this is another thing that I haven't talked about a lot. Morgan had the same, he had the same base character sheet as Harry Dresden. That was where he got started, was exactly the same way. And he's Harry Dresden after 100 years of 150, 200 years of just being ground down and seeing terrible things and feeling like he had to be the one to try and do something about it. And the difference between Harry and Morgan is that Morgan has more failures on his record. Morgan, he got to see more terrible things. He got to fail to save the little girl, more often than Dresden did. That's the sort of thing that just wears on you. And, Dresden's this young character in this world of people who are old, and as I'm getting older, I'm looking around realizing, going, oh my God, these kids, we have to protect them. It's kind of the attitude you find yourself with is, you look at the younger people and go, wow, they haven't seen, all this stuff that I've seen. They're not prepared for, all this stuff that I've been through. And the part you don't think about is, well, I'm not prepared for the stuff I haven't been prepared for either, and the kids are being prepared for a different future than me. But you have that protective urge where you want to go, okay, you know what? I don't want you to get hurt. I'm going to do what I can to help you. And yet the things that you do as the older person to help often conflict with the ideals of the younger person who hasn't been around as long. And so, I'm kind of getting it from both ends now. I started off as that young idealist, like, aha, I'm going to do all the ideal things, as a writer and as a human being. And then, you run into thing after thing, and you have to figure out, okay, where am I going to pick? Where am I going to pick my ideals to say, no, this is absolutely worth this fight. I will stand my ground here. And where are you going to go? Okay, you know what? Maybe I'm not as smart as I think I was. Maybe this doesn't apply right here. Maybe I need to shut up and listen to somebody else. Man, it's hard to find that balance. And Dresden is going through some of the same stuff now. And
it's right, because he has some pretty serious. But when he has to decide which hill to die on, it's a lot more literal.
Yes,
than exactly. With us. Yeah.
And not only that, but he's got to be asking the question, okay, am I dying on this hill, or am I leading all these other people to die on the hill with me? Because he just got done doing that in Battleground.
Yeah.
And, he had to live through, the emotional impact of all these deaths.
The banner.
Yeah, with the banner of will.
When you came up with that
I never planned on, it just happened. And I realized, oh, wait, this blends in with all these other things that I've been doing all along. It just happens to be, this is the first time Dresden's doing it. And, but yeah, to have him and then to be able to take Mab and go, well, no wonder Mab's a little cold and distant. She's done this hundreds of times, and no wonder she's a little bit in the distance there. Yeah, I would have to do that to stay sane as well. So
I think like I literally have the quote from the page when Harry is under the banner and realizes this is Mab's existence all the time. I have that like saved on my phone. Like that was when you came up with the banner. I like write down that day because you were cooking on that day when you were like, "This is a good idea."
good day.
That section of
That was one of those things that I started writing, and I thought to myself, "What the hell are you doing?" And then I said, "No, my instincts say this is fine. Trust them." I still have the instincts of the 25-year-old kid, who first started writing Stormfront. And so when he takes off on a tear and he's terribly enthusiastic about something, at this point, I kind of look at that kid and go, "All right, go ahead, let's see how this plays out."
Sometimes you sit back and you let young Jim cook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, young Jim is doing this part of the meal. Oh, all right, he insists. He seems to have an idea of what he's doing, so I'll just let him. But yeah, stuff like that. That's as a writer, you have to know, or you have to develop a sense of when to let your instincts go, and just let them go wild, and when you can go, oh wait a minute, this is taking me completely somewhere else that is not going to be profitable and not going to finish this book anywhere close to on time.
And also, I'm assuming it was the challenge of Battleground to be like, hey, there's this entire book about a battle, but we still want it to be like focused on like character and story. Like you don't want it to be a 350-page action scene.
Well, and especially, I mean, the book was originally written to be one. Peace Talks and Battleground was just going to be one book.
Peace Talks.
Yeah. And I thought that'd be a great way to do it. Call it Peace Talks and have most of it be about a fight. But when they said, hey, we need to split this into 2 books or we're going to have to charge over $50 for the hardback. And I was like, I'm not going to be the first guy to have a $50 hardback. Sanderson can do that. He's got the fan base for it. And so I knew I was going to have to split them. And at that point I had to think, okay, where's the best place to do it? And all right, now you're going to be doing all these battle scenes, but you're going to have more meat to it than just the action. So you're going to have to work in some plot, for Battleground as well. Oh, that was a challenge. Although it was fairly easy to do because it is much easier to build. What I wound up with was, instead of having one big elephant that they wanted me to carve down into a racehorse, I wound up with 2 kind of skinny racehorses that I had to add muscle to make them fast enough. And that worked out a lot better than trying to carve down the elephant.
Yeah, because I mean it was very challenging, especially like it'd be such a jarring tone shift of like, hey, the main plot is, I guess this is the spoiler section, the main plot is rescuing, oh my god, here comes a Titan, which happened a little bit. Like sometimes people ask me like, oh, what's like, I've heard about it, it's almost like a 2-parter, and I describe it, it's like, okay, imagine there's Turncoat, but then instead of like a year between Turncoat and changes happens 3/4 of the way into Turncoat.
Right.
And it's just like, good luck, have fun, Harry.
Oh, well, I mean, that was definitely the 2-part very special episode that comes at the middle of the season. They used to do that a lot on old TV. Where you knew when big things were happening because there'd be a 2-parter episode. And you can especially you can see it demonstrated. I think Joss Whedon weaponized it on Buffy. Because you knew that when the serious things were happening, because he would just tell you this is a 2-part episode. Okay, lots of important things are going to be going on. So that was definitely how I thought of it, and I wanted them to release it in back-to-back months. So I wanted you to be able to buy it in July and then read the sequel in August. But they said no, we can't.
Too many books.
Yeah, they said we can't do that, and I'm like, why not? And they're like, well, Jim, you sell too many copies. We only have so many slots for production of this many copies every quarter, so we can put you in back-to-back quarters, and we'll do our best to put you in back-to-back weeks in those quarters. But quarters is as close as we can promise. And okay, fine. I wanted a very special episode. You're ruining my television career.
Well, in hindsight, I just ended up reading Peace Talks twice.
Says, well, I edit books, so I had to be like, oh, I guess that's true. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna switch out because another thing you have a lot of is you pull a lot from mythological sources, obviously, because if it exists, it's in Dresden.
I figure if it's been a story for 2,000 years, there's probably some good storytelling going on there, whether I like it or not.
And also, it makes sense in world because in the Dresden world, the reason those things are written down is because they're based on something that happened.
Yeah.
So it works out. It works on many levels.
It does.
I was curious because I think you're like, it's really impressive, like how well you pick interpretations. Because there's a lot of different like interpretations of these mythological sources, and you could kind of go in a few directions. Are you trying to pick more like what you think is the closest to what's canon, or just whatever fits with Dresden? And has there been a time where you're like, this kind of fits the mood of Dresden, what I want, but not as much with like what I'm reading about? And how do you balance that?
Oh, mostly I just write it to blend in with the plot that I'm doing right then. I mean, that's 75% of them. It's like, okay, this is the plot. I need this monster to be, or this creature to behave in this particular way. So I'm going to add in a throwaway line about that Dresden has to say about mythology and how stories get confused sometimes, and we'll do it like that. Other times I'll look at the mythological story and go, there's a lot of potential here that's not being explored, and I want to do that. So I'll grab that and start doing it. And other times it's especially if it's mythology that's just been used so much. Stoker vampires have been used so much, and it's like, okay, I don't want to go without them completely, but I do want to start playing with this mythology on a meta level and see if I can do some fun stuff with it that people will be amused by. So I had, there are a set of Stoker vampires, but even Stoker only had some of it right. Although he had a lot more than a lot of other people, because he had help from a rival gang of vampires who were really wanting to get rid of those vampires. And so they made sure they got all the weaknesses right so that everybody would know how to kill them. Although I do have to say, yeah, impaling the heart, cutting off the head, that's pretty much everyone's weakness. People say, oh, it's their weakness having being staked through the heart. It's like, okay, that's everybody.
That's my weakness too, actually, believe it or not.
Mine as well, and also yours. I bet if we tested. But yeah. But I wanted to, I wanted to give not just the regular version of everything that we've got so far, while still keeping enough familiar stuff that people would go, okay, here's where we're starting. Here's where we're segueing into, and that way everybody feels like they're oriented. They know what's going on.
And one of my favorites is your interpretation of Hades from Skin.
Oh, thank you.
Especially.
Yeah. I really think that you could do a Greek pantheon soap opera. I mean, just soap opera style, and it would be perfect. I mean, you wouldn't have to change anything.
Yeah, that could work.
I mean, it fits really well. So it's like, okay, who would Hades be if he was on Young and the Restless? Who would that character be? And it's like, oh, wait a minute. He's good looking, sort of dark. He's got this girl who loves him, but who also doesn't spend the whole year with him. And there's all this conflict around him. He's going to be one of these complicated guys that everybody knows. The entire female audience knows. If they could just get a hold of him, they could save him. That's who he's going to be, So I put him here. I put him there as that guy, as kind of dark, but also, he really was. He was the reliable one in the family.
Yeah, and it was refreshing because he's kind of been Hollywoodified a lot of the time, where it's
like, I just like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. James Wood did a great job as Hades, in Hercules, in Disney Hercules, but that really simplified who the character was, and I didn't think did him justice.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's cool interpret. I reckon that's a pretty good answer. All right, I have another slight joke question. Are you ready for this? But I don't think it's been asked. You've mentioned, like, people have asked, what does Harry think of these, like, authors in world? And you've mentioned, like, he's read Sanderson. This raises the obvious question. Has he read Codex Alera? Does Codex Alera exist in Dresden world?
Oh, God. I don't think I can meta that far. Yeah, I don't think I could mention my own books in the Dresden world without Harry coming to find me. Without out there in the wider multiverse, that Harry deciding, okay, you know what, you arrogant fuck, I'm gonna come find you and punch you in the nose because you've made my life living hell.
Yeah, you could be like, hey, you made your life living hell. I just told people about it.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I suppose.
I don't know if he'll buy that explanation.
Yeah. Dresden's pretty passionate. He'll get fired up about a monster somewhere and go do something about it, and he'll ask questions later.
Yeah, that is true.
He'll blame himself for how everything went wrong later.
Yeah, you probably don't want to piss Harry off. That's a
Yeah.
good idea. Because I figure, like, obviously Dresden doesn't exist in Dresden. That's too far. But I was like, Alera and Dresden, though?
Uh,
Harry
well,
Potter canonically exists in Dresden. So it's,
yeah,
I guess,
Harry
in this
Potter
version.
does. I mean, Harry Potter definitely does.
Yeah, got referenced again in Day Off when a
Yeah.
couple times.
Yeah.
And Battleground Dash. No, Peace Talks, whatever. I don't need to remember when things are referenced in every book.
Yeah, I want Dresden's nerd world to be as close to our nerd world as it can be. So there's the MCU and everything like that. It all exists in Dresden's world.
But it's just basically
put my other series in there though. That seems a little far.
Yeah, so the other version of Jim just didn't make enough bets. He was not cocky enough.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
He's too cautious. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All the foolhardiness was taken by Harry, so that Jim was
perhaps he was saved from being bullied as a child, which is where I get a lot of it. When I was a kid, I got bullied a lot, and because I had the bad taste to be the smartest kid in class and the smallest kid in class, and I might have mouthed off a little, and so I got beat up a lot.
You mouthed off?
Yeah, right. And that's sort of where that attitude came from. When I felt that people were trying to bully me, and so I'd throw stuff back in their face, and I'd drop bets and stuff like that. Just to make them sure that I wasn't intimidated by them.
So basically, what we're just saying is, in Harry's world, Jim just hit a growth spurt really early.
Yeah, or maybe one of the first times that I got beat up, because it sort of became a pattern after that first time. Maybe he showed up and took the beating for me instead.
That's nice of him, especially since you spent years tormenting him.
I think what I'll think of it as is that fictional world Jim Butcher is like well-adjusted and happy. He's got no relationship issues or anything like that, because he didn't get messed up as bad when he was young. So.
Well, thanks, Harry. He's helping you out here, even though you've tortured him for
what a guy.
Decades. What a good guy. All right, I have ready for this. This next section is only for the cool people who have read all of Dresden and the Olympian Affair.
Okay.
Because this is a cross question. And it's somewhat as a tangent of the mythological interpretation. Because one kind of interesting thing is there's now one being of crossover, because they both have archangels. But the archangels are very, very different. Like, if they didn't have the same name, they wouldn't be recognizably the same creature, creature. They're not the same creature. What do you think led to them being that different, and you going with that interpretation in Cinder Spires compared to the Dresden interpretation?
You're going to stay tuned on. I can't really talk about it.
Yeah, I guess they're kind of a hook for.
What I do with a lot of characters in the Dresden Files universe, I'm going to do with the story world in the Cinder Spires universe, where it's not going to be the world you thought it was. And that will get unfolded a little bit at a time as we go, because I think that would be a lot of fun. But it's because of the actual source of the story world, the archangels aren't the same, and you'll see why eventually.
Well, that'll be cool. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah,
so you're saying
I was just so happy to get to introduce him in the epilogue.
He's cool.
Because I hadn't actually planned on doing that for a couple more books, and then I thought, you know what? Why not? Let's start introducing some of these wider cosmos elements right now, and we'll be able to see more as we keep going.
It's kind of sad Dresden doesn't have epilogues, because you have some damn good epilogues. Like you go off in some of them. I think when people are reading Cursor's Fury, them reading the epilogue of that book is my happy place, where it's like you get the Valiar Marcus reveal. That one's great every time. There was someone who was complaining about the lack of that character in the entire book, and then they got to it and were just like, "You got me."
It's like, yeah, come on. It was the same guy. He looks a little bit different, but it's the same build and basically the same character in most ways. And, Valiar Marcus was not a stretch for Fidelius.
Oh yeah. He wasn't even working that hard on that one.
Yeah.
That off. So I've actually learned, do you know, is Big Apocalyptic Trilogy going to be all Harry point of views, or could we mayhaps get some epilogues from other people's perspective?
At the end? I don't know. I could really fuck with people and do some epilogue. Did it right if I timed it right.
I'm just saying. I'd be one of the people you're fucking with, and I'm still endorsing it.
I've often thought of the most horrible thing I could do to my readers, and the most horrible thing I can do to the readers is write it all the way up to the big finale at the end, and then to reveal that all the books all along have been Dresden writing this stuff down because he knows he might not survive this last one. And to finish the story with, well, I'm going into the last big fight. See ya. I guess if I live, I'll write more, and then to have the epilogue written by Molly, something like that. I mean, that would just rip people to shreds if I did it like that. Yeah, you don't have to be a sadist to be a writer, but my God, it's useful.
It certainly helps. It seems like.
Think about, how do I torture the readers best, and not just the most, get the most emotion out of them that I can, but how do I do it, the most artistically, so that I get them a little bit at around 9 in the evening and a little bit around 11, and then at 1:30 they're sobbing. How do I do that?
You got to give them a little hope, like not all despair. You got to maximize the despair, to get the best despair.
It's one thing to have something bad happen to a character. It's another thing to have something bad happen to a character 6 inches shy of the finish line of whatever it is they've been trying to do for 10 years. I mean, that just gets into artistry.
You're going for quality despair here.
Yeah, I mean, I want not just standards. Quantity of pain, quality of pain. I mean, that's important.
That could be your motto. Yeah, not just quantity of pain, quality of pain. Quote Jim Butcher.
Yeah,
I
need to work that into my writing classes. I teach writing classes once a year at Superstars, and there's a different subject every year. So this year the subject was how to write crowning moments of awesome, and how to set them up. But yeah, I need to work that into. I just need how to torture the reader effectively, and that just needs to be all by itself, a lecture. This is how you torture the reader effectively.
I feel like that could be an entire class.
Reader. Anybody can torture a reader. That's easy. All you have to do is be bad. You can torture the reader. But how to do it artistically, how to do it so that they pay you to do it some more.
Yeah, it's not about who hurts me the worst. It's about who hurts me the best for the authors.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's your other. So I quote Dresden theorem, by the way, which is if you have a problem, then you have a problem. But if you have multiple problems, then you might have a problem and a solution. That can be. That's what I think of. It's like as Dresden's motto.
Yeah.
All right. I have. We are past an hour, and I've run over my thing. So I think I'm running out of questions. I'd like to give a huge thanks to getting on here. He's coming on here with a fever of 101. So he came out with a great performance. This is his flu interview. It hopefully goes down in legend.
Yeah, I've had so much caffeine, so I hope I didn't embarrass myself too badly.
I thought it was a pretty damn good interview, if I do say so myself. So I'm sure I'll think of something that I wanted to ask you in a week and be like, damn it, but that's okay. That's life.
Well, that's okay. Jake, we can set up another interview next time there's a book out, and we'll talk some more.
Fantastic. That sounds awesome. I'll keep a list of the things I want to ask you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, brother. You take care.
Have a good day, Jim.
You too.
Hopefully Harry can have a good day too.